The 2023-2024 NFL season brought many different surprises this year. From bad teams playing good to good teams playing bad, today I want to look a little bit more on the positive side of things and give you guys the 5 biggest positive surprises of the 2023-24 season. So with that being said, let's just hop right into it. These are going to be in no particular order. I think that these are all equal in their own right. So the first surprise I want to discuss is the simple fact that there were many rookies who made major impacts on their team's entire season. And I think of the rookies that played great this year, 3 of them really stood out. Of course, CJ Stroud, of course, Puka Nacua, but also Jahmyr Gibbs. And there's a ton of other rookies who did a lot of really good things too, but I'm mainly focusing on those 3 guys because those guys obviously helped their teams deep into the playoffs as well. Real quick, want to give a shout out to a couple other rookies. Shout out to Sam Laporta, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, and Devon Witherspoon. But to really hone in on CJ Stroud and Puka Nacua, nobody really thought they'd be this good. CJ Stroud, yes, was the 2nd overall pick, but early on into his career, it was looking kind of dark. And then through week 1, it also looked pretty questionable. And then of course, CJ Stroud after that played absolutely fantastic. Hell, at one point he was even in the MVP discussions. And then of course, we can't talk about CJ Stroud without talking about his most recent playoff run. Because sure, he didn't really play all that great against the Baltimore Ravens, but he played freaking fantastic against the Cleveland Browns. And to me, that tells me everything I need to know about what CJ Stroud is right now and what he can be moving forward. And then moving on, you got Puka Nacua, who set almost every single receiving record in the entire books for a rookie. But what's even more surprising about this is he was not even a 1st or 2nd round pick. This was somebody who was taken late in the NFL draft with the LA Rams and was expected to be maybe a decent contributor as a 3rd or 4th option, but then silently became the receiver 1 for the LA Rams. And now it's not so silent as everybody in the entire world knows about Puka Nacua, and moving forward, he is going to be a force to be reckoned with. Now, it also does help that his teammates Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp and Sean McVay are just freaking fantastic at what they do, but man, Puka Nacua can play, dog. And then of course, Jahmyr Gibbs had a great season in his own right. He is maybe the biggest reason why the Lions offense was so dynamic. Him and David Montgomery really made that offense a 1-2 combination where they could basically do whatever they want. And after they got a ton of scrutiny for taking him so early in the 1st round, I think he played up to expectations and honestly surpassed my expectations for him. So shout out to all the rookies. I thought they were pretty surprising with how they played in their 1st season. Moving on to my 2nd biggest surprise of the NFL season, and that is going to be the NFC North having a bit of a resurgence. Now, I understand the Minnesota Vikings were a little bit disappointing this year, but I think had Kirk Cousins been healthy, I think there was a very decent chance they ended up winning the division, or at least being a wildcard team. And I think moving forward, the Minnesota Vikings are going to be a good team, especially if they do decide to bring back Kirk Cousins. Bit of a hint here, I do have a Minnesota Vikings video coming out soon. I haven't made it yet, but it'll probably be a video where I talk about a couple teams that are going to be surprisingly good next year, so that's a little bit of a sneak peek. But then when you look at the rest of the NFC North, the Lions, the Green Bay Packers, and even the Chicago Bears, their futures are extremely bright. Obviously, Chicago has the number 1 overall pick, but they also have their 2nd first-round pick as well, so they're going to be able to stack up 2 top premier talents from this year's draft on a roster that could definitely use the talent. And with my expectations of them trading away Justin Fields, they're going to be able to get another piece to add on to this offense and defense as well. Not to mention they have the cap space to fix a lot of their problems. So while I don't think Chicago is going to be this top 10 team next year, I do think they could be pretty damn good, all things considered. And then of course, you have the Green Bay Packers, which I think enough is said about them. Jordan Love is playing fantastic, and I think that he is going to be a superstar moving forward. And while I do have a couple questions regarding certain positions on this team, with the growing cap space and then making a couple restructures, as well of course their 1st round picks and 2nd round picks, they are going to be able to address some of their problems this upcoming offseason. And while I don't know if this team's going to be a contender per se anytime soon, I do think this team is going in the right direction. And then you have the Detroit Lions, who arguably should be playing in the Super Bowl in 2 weeks. They are obviously one of the best teams in the entire NFL, and moving forward, they have a lot to be proud of. And this is coming after a year in which the Minnesota Vikings ran away with the division and the rest of the teams looked kind of questionable. So let's be honest, the NFC North that was pretty questionable last year is going to be doing a lot of good things next year and moving forward. But before I get to my 3rd biggest surprise, I want to give a special shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest and fastest growing fantasy sports app available. My favorite thing about Underdog Fantasy is their pick'em games. Simply pick higher or lower for your favorite player's stats, and you'll have a chance to win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Pick between 2 to 5 players in a pick'em entry, and if you get them right, you'll be able to earn some serious cash. I personally love playing these pick'em games on game day to add another level of excitement for my day. And you can too if you sign up today using the link in the description below. Make sure to use promo code METROSPORTS, and you can get your first deposit doubled up to $100 Jaguars, as well as an instant pick'em special. Underdog Fantasy is available to you in many different states. Check the screen right now to see if your state is eligible. And again, make sure to download Underdog Fantasy using promo code MetroSports. And I want to give a special thank you to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring today's video. But now let's get on to my third biggest surprise, and this follows suits a little bit with the NFC North one, but this one's a little bit more interesting. It is the reshuffling of the AFC South. You see, we all knew that Houston, Indianapolis, Tennessee, and Jacksonville were all teams on the rise. I mean, at the end of the day, Indianapolis took a rookie quarterback, so did Houston, and of course, so did the Tennessee Titans. But we all thought that the Jacksonville Jaguars were the big dogs of the division. And that was for the most part the case throughout most of the season, until the Jaguars had a total collapse on the back end of the season. And then, as we all know, the Houston Texans beat the Indianapolis Colts to actually make the playoffs. But as it sits right now, the Jacksonville Jaguars are now sitting at 3rd or 4th place in the division when it comes to overall outlook moving forward, because Houston is going to be contenders moving forward. Indianapolis, with a healthy Anthony Richardson, are, in my opinion, the team to watch moving forward. And even though I question Tennessee's coaching decisions, if Will Levis is truly that guy, I do think moving forward it can be a good matchup over there. And going a little bit deeper into Tennessee, if they do make a couple right decisions moving forward, I actually think they could be a pretty fun team as well. And then there's Jacksonville. And listen, I have a lot of questions about Jacksonville, but with Trevor Lawrence, with Doug Peterson, with Travis Etienne, and a lot of their stars, I do think they're in a good position, but I do have questions about whether or not they are legitimately the team to beat within the AFC South. So at the end of the day, Houston is up, Indianapolis is up, Tennessee is up, Jacksonville might be down. We're just going to have to kind of wait to see. But it is definitely a far cry from what we saw this past offseason, where everyone was saying that Jacksonville would run away with this division and Houston, Indianapolis, and Tennessee would have a lot of things to figure out. Well, the tables have turned, and now it turns out that Jacksonville and still Tennessee have a lot to figure out. But let us now move on to the 4th biggest surprise of the season, and for me, the 4th biggest surprise was the MVP race. If you would have told me that Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Dak Prescott, and Lamar Jackson would be the 4 guys who are the frontrunners to win the MVP, I'd probably call you crazy. Because of course, you expect guys like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow to be those MVP favorites, but this year it really wasn't the case. Sure, Josh Allen got into the MVP race late into the season, but for the most part, he was struggling throughout a lot of the season, and the same thing kind of applies to Patrick Mahomes. Like, yes, Patrick Mahomes is in the Super Bowl, but throughout most of the season, he was actually playing pretty below average, whereas guys like Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, even Tyreek Hill played good enough to play in that MVP discussion. And when you look at the statistical aspect of things, there's a really legitimate argument to say that Brock Purdy and Dak Prescott should be the 1 or 2 guys who actually won the MVP. But when you actually look at the definition of what the MVP is, of course Lamar Jackson will win it, and I do think it's well deserved. But of course, if you had told me that those were the guys who were going to win the MVP, I would have been very shocked. And this is a positive thing, because to be honest with you, I like to see MVPs be different every year. It's kind of lame when you have the exact same MVPs every single year. I mean, just look at the NBA right now. They're currently stuck with Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid being the 1-2 guys who are probably going to win the MVP this year, which to be honest with you just makes the whole MVP thing not that fun. It's partially why none of us are really that excited for the Super Bowl, because we've kind of seen the same story over and over again with Patrick Mahomes and now the 49ers. But at least with the MVP award, we're going to get somebody new who wins it, and I think again it will be Lamar Jackson, and I think he does deserve it, which I think is pretty cool. But then we get to, in my opinion, the biggest surprise of the NFL season. I know I said this is not really in particular order, but I do think if there was an order, then this would be the biggest one. And that is the simple fact that the NFL landscape is currently going through a shift. Yes, I know Patrick Mahomes and the 49ers are still in the Super Bowl and more than likely will be contenders next year, but we're seeing a lot of the good teams start to struggle and a lot of the bad teams turn really good. It's going to be a few years now in which we're going to see teams like Houston, Indianapolis, the Chicago Bears, the Green Bay Packers, the Detroit Lions. Hell, I'll even throw a team like the Washington Commanders in there if they make the right decision this offseason. And I'm sure I'm missing a handful of teams, but those are the teams that moving forward are going to be the dominant teams. Teams like Dallas, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, and hell, even the Buffalo Bills are starting to look a lot more questionable every single day. Again, I understand the whole landscape with Patrick Mahomes isn't going to change. He's still the best quarterback in the NFL, and that team is still always going to be the team to beat. But these supplemental teams outside of the Chiefs are currently going through a massive shift. And I think now, more than ever, you're going to see a lot of these teams that are good right now make drastic decisions that are going to have to completely change what they do moving forward. Look at what Dallas just did. They are staying exactly the same this year as they were last year, and I guarantee you they're not going to take the step they want to take. The same thing applies with the Philadelphia Eagles, which by the way, I just made a video on them. I have a lot of opinions on them, so make sure to check that video out. I'll have it pinned up at the very end. But I think right now, you need to see these big time teams that are currently playing big and good make the proper steps to continue to be that same team. Because again, there's a lot of up and coming teams that may not have the talent, but have a lot of things going for them to eventually take over your spot. That's not me saying that next year, the Cowboys, the Eagles, all the teams that I've mentioned are not going to be making the playoffs. In fact, I think they will. But I think it's just a matter of time until the landscape has completely shifted over to these new school teams. And when I say the NFL landscape is changing, I don't just mean team-wise, I mean personnel-wise, I mean schematics-wise. I think the whole league is currently going through a weird shift right now. And I think there's a lot of catching up from different departments that need to be made. But all in all, I want to know your guys' biggest surprise of the current season. And overall, let's rank it a scale through 1 through 10. Was this season fun? I thought it was fun till the very end. But you guys tell me, and if you did enjoy, hit the like and subscribe button, because I love you guys. Peace.